Okay, welcome everyone. I think we've got the last few people finding seats now, so come on in, find a seat. We are so pleased to be able to welcome you here today. Really, really appreciate you coming out. This is our first kind of major public event for the McMaster Monitoring My Mobility study, or MacM3. So we're really, really excited to be here talking to you today. And really, without you, this study would not be possible. So I'm Marla Beauchamp. I am the lead investigator of the MacM3 program. I'm an associate professor in the School of Rehabilitation Science at McMaster, and I'm also the director of the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging Dixon Hall Center. And so what we're going to cover today, this is sort of what the day looks like. I'm going to start by giving you a brief update on MacM3, remind you why it is we created this study and what it is we're finding so far. Then I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Ben Cornish, who's a postdoctoral fellow in our lab, and he's going to talk to you about the importance of device placement and analytics strategy, because really it's, when we work with these devices, it's a lot more complex than a lot of people might think. Then Dr. Stephanie Saunders, another postdoc with us, is going to look at share us a preview of some of the falls data that we've been collecting as part of MacM3. I'll provide a quick update on the Aging, Infection, and Mobility project that many of you are a part of. And then we're going to have Dr. Louise LaFortune. She's going to announce our new Mind Moves study. So this is a new program of research we're launching, which is an extension to MacM3, so she'll tell you all about that. Then we'll have a question and answer session. So I will ask you to leave your questions until the end, and we'll go back and forth with questions. Then I'll introduce to you a lot of the very familiar faces you might already see around the room. Well, and that way you can see all of us that are part of the MacM3 team, and you can go find anyone afterwards to ask questions and to chat with. There's refreshments outside that you can welcome to have. We have some posters up in the very back of the room. You'll see there's some posters, and those are posters done by a lot of our lab group members on different aspects related to MacM3. It gives you a kind of a taste of like the research that we're doing. Also out in the atrium is a large white, what do you call it? Easel poster board, and you can go there and we're just, give us your feedback. What are you most excited about after today about MacM3, or is there something that you wish we had talked about but didn't? So you can go and give your feedback afterwards as well. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, why study aging and mobility? So why did we design a project all around these two issues? Well, first of all, we're living in a really unprecedented time in history. People are living longer than ever before. By the year 2050, approximately 25% of the global population will be over the age of 65, okay? And now, even though people are living longer than ever before, these additional years are often not spent in good health. So those additional years, people are not necessarily living healthier. So our goal is to help people live longer and healthier. And in order to do that, we really need to focus on function and on mobility to help people stay independent as long as possible. So a lot of aging experts refer to mobility as the sixth vital sign. And that's because when you have problems with mobility, for example, difficulty walking, these increase with age, and they're often the first sign of a decline or change in an underlying health system. For example, a change in the way you walk could signal the beginning of a neurological condition. And these problems with walking and with mobility in general can often predict disability, hospitalization, and mortality. So if we identify people early and provide them with treatment, we can slow decline and improve health outcomes. So really supporting mobility is absolutely key for healthy aging. So what do we mean by mobility? And in our group, we use the terminology endorsed by the World Health Organization. And that defines mobility as movement in all its forms, whether powered by the body, with or without an assistive device, or by a vehicle. And if you look at the examples of the pictures in this slide, you can see that mobility means quite a lot of different things. So anything from walking, to driving a car, to climbing stairs, to riding a bike, and to even more simple activities like just getting out of a chair or off a couch. Now, we're really interested in MacM3 in this concept of early mobility limitation, or what we call preclinical mobility limitation. And what this is that research a long time ago figured out that there's a kind of a continuum where people lose mobility as they get older. So they progress from having no limitation or no difficulty to the stage of preclinical mobility limitation, where people might notice that they have to modify the way they do a task, or a task that they do takes more effort. And so this could look like, I used to be able to climb the stairs without a handrail. Now I'm holding on to the handrail. I used to be able to walk 2 kilometers without difficulty. Now I need to stop and rest. So no, I don't have difficulty walking. No, I don't have difficulty climbing stairs, but I actually have modified the way that I do it. Without actually noticing a perception of difficulty or disability. And so this window is really the most critical window for us to be able to intervene. If we can intervene early when people start to have these sort of preclinical changes, we are likely to have the greatest impact on slowing mobility decline over time, and even on reversing it. And so that's one of our big focuses in MacM3, and one of the reasons we're using the wearable technologies, because we believe that those technologies have the power to provide us with insights on those early changes that you might not otherwise notice. So what is the MacM3 study? So we were actually funded in 2019 by the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging and the LaBarge Center for Mobility and Aging, which is really supported by a generous gift from Suzanne LaBarge, who was the chancellor of the university. And we are really fortunate to have her as a champion of aging here at McMaster. And so this was one of the first major research programs that was supported by the Institute, and it allowed us to bring together lots and lots of investigators and scientists from different backgrounds to sort of try and tackle a problem that's likely to have a big impact. So we designed this study, this MacM3 study, to follow 1,500 older people over at least 2 years using wearable technology. And as you all know, we have the combination of a smartwatch that you wear on your wrist, and then you have the thigh-worn device if you've agreed to wear it on your thigh. And that combination of data gives us information like daily steps, activity levels, time spent sitting, standing, lying, GPS information like location, how far do you travel when you leave your home, how often are you using active transportation versus passive transportation, how big is your life space area. So really, really interesting information on context that we can get with that GPS data that's coming from the wrist. And then, of course, we're tracking major health outcomes. So falls, and you'll hear more about that today, hospitalizations, ER visits, development of new conditions. So this allows us then to look at the wearable data that we're collecting every 4 months, for 10 days every 4 months throughout the study, and link that data to some of these health outcomes. So what exactly are we trying to understand with MacM3? So we want to know, first of all, how does mobility change over time? We want to identify different patterns of movement across aging and really look for those early signs of decline. Could we capture those early signs of mobility decline using wearable technology just by tracking people in their real life environments. We want to understand how to predict health outcomes. How can we predict whether someone develops disability or has a fall or is at risk of a hospitalization? And if we can identify those factors that put you at risk and then the factors that protect you, we have the best shot at trying to maintain function and healthy aging. And then ultimately, what we want to do with all the data, today we're going to share some of the data, but we want to actually be able to use this information to try and support healthy aging. So we'd like to use the data that we're collecting to help us develop new interventions, new policies, new ways that we can help people live independently for longer in their homes and communities. So again, we're not focused on longevity. We don't want people just to live longer. We want people to live better for longer. So let's talk a little bit about some of your data. So some of the data you've provided us at baseline, which means at the very beginning of the study, and we're going to have a look through some of that data to understand who are our participants. So we have about 200 people here today, but in all of MacM3 we have over 1,500 people. So I'm going to share with you some of the characteristics, and note all your data has been de-anonymized, so it's completely anonymous, and it's just we're looking at the data in aggregate. Okay. So we assessed in MacM3 over 2,000 people for eligibility and ultimately ended up consenting just over 1,550 people to enter our study. Our target was 1,500. We had 1,506 people complete our baseline assessment. And we've had, and our 24 months are still ongoing, but we've had so far 1,261 people complete the initial 2-year time frame of MacM3. So this represents about a 17% loss to follow-up, which is really excellent, especially given the nature of the study with the frequent monitoring. And we still have about 30 active participants that are set to complete their 24-month follow-ups. And of course, anyone that signed up for extensions to MacM3 would still be sticking with us. So, some baseline demographics. Overall, the average age of participants in our study was 74 years. 68% were female. And these are the cultural backgrounds that were reported by the participants. So we can see that English, Scottish, and Irish backgrounds seem to be the most common, then Canadian, German, Chinese, French, and then we have a big category of others that just that includes lots of other cultural backgrounds. In terms of social and health characteristics, if you look on the left panel, we have education level. So we see that actually this group is a very educated group. On average, 75% of people have a post-secondary diploma. 11% have done some post-secondary education, and 10% had secondary school completed. In terms of self-rated general health, again, people are feeling pretty good here. So we have 16% of people reporting excellent general health, and then 44% is the biggest category, reporting very good health. And this is at the beginning of the study. 30% of people reported good, and about 8% of people reported fair, and a very small proportion reported poor. So this is consistent with what we would expect based on our recruitment strategy in the whole point of our study, which is that we want to study early decline. We want to look at people who are doing well, and we want to watch and see what happens and try and figure out what are the things that identify people who might do poorly in the future. So chronic conditions that were reported, the most common one was cataracts and osteoarthritis, followed by hypertension. And then we had back pain, osteoporosis, cancer, all around 16 to 17%, diabetes at 11%, and depression at 11%. And most people had 3 or more of these. So most people, 63% of people had at least 3 of these chronic conditions at the same time. On the right side, we can look at number of medications that people reported using. And here again, we see the most common thing is for people to be on at least 3 different medications. And all of this is extremely normal and common as we get older. And 1 or 2 medications, 37% of people reported taking 1 or 2, and then no medications, around 19%. Now let's look at some of the mobility information that you provided. Now again, we excluded people at the beginning of the study who said, you know what, you know those questions that we ask you all the time about how far you can walk and about stairs. So if you say, I have major difficulty doing that, you would have been excluded from the study at the start. So the people at the start of the study, most people, about 57% of people had what we would consider to have no mobility limitations. So they had no difficulty with walking or doing stairs, and they had not modified the way they did those things. We had 16% of people fall into that preclinical or early mobility category, early mobility limitation category. So those people indicated, you know what? No, I don't have difficulty doing those things, but I have noticed that I changed the way I do those. And then 27% had minor mobility limitation, which means I do have a little bit of difficulty walking. I do have a little bit of difficulty climbing stairs. In terms of mobility aids, 94% of the cohort did not use a mobility aid like a walker or a cane, and about 38% of people reported a fall in the previous year, and you'll hear more about falls later. So now let's look at health outcomes. So what happened after 1 year of follow-up? So if we first think about healthcare utilization, and we're just talking here about ER visits, so a visit to the emergency room, or a hospitalization where you stayed overnight in a hospital for any reason, we had about 13% of people have either an ER visit or a hospitalization over the 1 year of follow-up in MacM3. Then if we look at the mobility outcomes, we had around 4% of people could not complete the 400-meter walk test. And then about another 8% of people developed a major mobility limitation. So these are people who now they didn't at the beginning, but now after 1 year of follow-up, they say, yes, I do have a great deal of difficulty walking or climbing stairs. So we consider that category, in research terms, it's referred to as mobility disability. And so 12% of people had developed what we would call mobility disability. So this really shows that just within 1 year of follow-ups, we are really seeing some clinically meaningful events in our cohort. So now let's turn to the wearables data. Okay, so you have here your smartwatch, and we'll talk you'll hear a little bit more from Ben about this, about the devices and why we sort of chose what we chose. But our smartwatch is a specially designed smartwatch that has been created to allow us to do research. So it collects data in a really rigorous way, allowing us to take out the raw data and do something with it in a validated way. And then we have the actigraph device, which is worn on the thigh. So first of all, I owe all of you a huge thank you, and we all do, because you all did such a beautiful job at wearing these devices as we asked. And so without that, we would really be dead in the water, so I really thank you for that. So the tick, yeah, really. So the wrist device, which is that TicWatch device, you guys wore that 13 hours and 58 minutes on average every day for 9.7 days. And so you did what we asked, and that is hugely important. For the thigh device, slightly less people ended up deciding to wear the thigh device, but we still had more than 1,000 people elect to wear it, which is wonderful. Again, 14 hours a day, 9.9 days on average. So you did what we asked, and we could not ask for more. So really high compliance, and that allows us to work with this data and get the outputs that we need to run analyses like I'm about to show you. So first of all, let's just look at this baseline data and understand something a simple metric like step count. So we get step count off the thigh device most reliably, and we can see here that as mobility limitation increases, the average daily steps decrease. So up here we have people with no mobility limitation, and they're walking 8,900 steps a day, which is very high. You guys are all also very high functioning group of people. So 8,900 steps a day if you have no mobility limitation. And now if you, let's go to you if you have minor mobility limitation. So again, here you're saying I have a little bit of difficulty walking or climbing stairs. Now steps have decreased to 7,250. Still really good step count numbers, but we are seeing a difference in step count across these sort of different mobility categories. And the same thing is true when we look at intensity of activity. So here we have on the y-axis proportion of the day, and we have time spent in sedentary, light, and moderate to vigorous physical activity. Okay, and so think of it as the colors get darker as you're going more intense in your activity levels. And if you have no mobility limitation, you tend to have more time spent in those higher intensity activities. And then as you move towards having minor preclinical and then minor mobility limitations, you're spending a little bit more time in that sedentary box and a little bit less time in the moderate to vigorous activity box. Now, this is where I think it gets really exciting, because now we've got the wearables data that we had at baseline, and we have those health outcomes that we've tracked over time. So this is data looking over the first 12 months of the study, and we can see that lower activity levels were associated with higher odds of mobility disability at 1 year. So if you walked less than 6,800 steps per day, you had a higher risk, about a 4 to 5 times higher odds of developing mobility disability within 1 year. If you did less than 28 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity in a day, and that could just be simply brisk walking. Brisk walking counts as moderate to vigorous physical activity, so less than 28 minutes was also associated with a significantly higher odds of developing mobility disability within the year. On the right-hand side, we have something called walking bouts. And walking bouts just simply means periods of continuous walking. So it turns out those are really important for predicting mobility disability. So if you have less than 3 minutes of continuous walking periods, you have a 7 times higher odds of developing mobility disability at 1 year. And then if we look at our GPS data, active trips seems to be important. So having less than 1 active trip a day is associated with a 2.5 times higher odds of developing mobility disability within the year. And what do I mean by an active trip? That's basically when we go from one location to another, but we power that by our own bodies, right? So if we walk to the grocery store, that would be an active trip. Now, when we look at predicting hospitalizations and ER visits, we have standing time become really important here. So less time standing, so if you stand less than 4.5 hours per day, that is associated with a 2 times higher odds of hospitalizations or ER visits within a year. So it's really important to limit and break up long periods of sedentary time with periods of standing and just doing even some light activities. And then moderate to vigorous physical activity, sorry for that MVPA as we tend to use in the exercise world. So that's moderate to vigorous physical activity, and so if you do less than 20 minutes a day of that moderate to vigorous physical activity, there's a 2 times higher odds of visiting an ER or having an overnight hospital stay at 1 year. So key messages so far from MacM3: lower activity levels and lower mobility levels. So fewer steps, less moderate to vigorous physical activity, more sedentary time, shorter walking bouts. They're linked to higher risk of mobility disability and hospitalizations and ER visits over 1 year. So the wearables information, the data we're getting from your real world activities and movements, they're really important for providing us some really complementary insights into mobility and health risk. And it's important to note, these are data on their own. We're not adjusting for anything else. The data that I've showed you is just taking that wearables information and using it to predict those health outcomes over time on their own. So that's pretty powerful. And what we're seeing is that around 7,000 steps per day or 30 minutes of brisk activity a day are good targets for many older people. Now, I have heard you, and we have done some focus groups, and we have met with our stakeholder advisory group, and what we're hearing is that people want more. They want individualized risk prediction, and they want to know, what specifically can I do to reduce my risk? We've heard you, and that is where we are going with this data. So that is a really big part of our next steps for MacM3. So now I'm going to pass the microphone to Dr. Ben Cornish, who's going to tell us a little bit more about devices and analytic approaches, so you can kind of understand what goes on the back end. Because we've heard questions from a lot of you, well, why can't I use a Fitbit? Why can't I use my smartphone? And Ben is going to tell you why.
Okay, so yeah, my name's Ben. The heart of my research is really about the analytic methods. I use wearable sensors to measure human movement, and I'm really interested in making sure the methods that we use to calculate those important outcomes that we rely on are accurate and appropriate for older adults. And I would echo, the data set that you guys have all participated in is massive. It is very, very unique to have multi-sensor, multi-wear in such a big study. So it's very appreciative from the whole team of all the work that you guys have put in as well. And today I'm going to talk about one project that's part of my postdoc, where we're looking at the impact of different wear locations and different analytic methods to calculate a simple outcome like step counts. But before we start, just to review, wearable sensors, sometimes we just call them wearables, are a good tool to measure daily life mobility because they're portable. They're relatively low cost. I know your Apple Watches and stuff are quite expensive, but some of the research grade tools we use are a little bit less expensive just because they don't have user interfaces. And they're unobtrusive. They're pretty easy to wear. The evidence and the data shows the amount that you guys wore these sensors proves that they are easy to adopt. And I like to divide wearable sensors into two different kind of categories. The first one is the devices we're actually using. So activity watches like your Fitbit, I wear a Garmin, Apple Watches, and that TicWatch that you guys wore for all those hours. We have research devices like those thigh-worn devices that we passed out, the Activity and Actigraph. And then there's many, many more like GPS trackers, step counters. I don't know if anyone's familiar with those old pedometers that you could shake and they'd rattle inside. Yeah, those are also wearable devices in a way. Inside all of those devices are the different sensors that we rely on in order to measure movement. And these sensors include accelerometers, and I have a video to demonstrate what an accelerometer looks like when it's collecting data, gyroscopes, which measure angular velocity, and GPS and stuff. And we use all this information to characterize daily life mobility. So you'll recognize the sensors on the left here, and then the video should start. And this is simply the accelerometer in the top right, and we're moving it through static positions. When it's static, it's measuring gravity, and that's why you're seeing these lines flip up and down, because it's measuring gravity in a static position. And then when we start moving it, you're gonna see that line kind of like a sinusoidal wave pop up, and that's just the movement. So when you guys are wearing these sensors, this is the type of signal that we are capturing, and then we use that to start to measure your movement in daily life. And what that looks like is on the next slide. So the next slide is a point of view of a GoPro on my chest while I'm walking, wearing 2 sensors on my wrists and 2 sensors on my legs. So the wrist data is going to be on the top, the ankle data is going to be on the bottom, and that little video on the side is just going to, you're going to see my arms and legs come in and out of the screen as I'm briskly walking on one winter afternoon, I think. And you can see the difference in the waveforms that we see at the wrist versus the lower limb, and why we might get different outcomes just from that raw data. The wrist has a good sinusoidal wave. You can see that. I'll play that again for you guys. You can see that waveform when I'm briskly walking, but you can imagine if you're doing a different daily life activity, that signal might not be as clear. But when my feet strike the ground, you can see those large spikes, and that's when that foot hits the ground, and it's making an impact that's measured through the accelerometer itself. And you can imagine there's many, many ways to analyze this data, and that's true. There's a lot of different ways to detect walking, but the big question for me is, are we using the right methods for the populations and people that it really matters for? So researchers and people and all the literature is very dominated by convenience, which is really just a single wrist-worn watch, wrist-worn at the wrist. They're easy to use, they're already in commercial devices, and they give you your output in a nice picture way at the end of the day, or maybe if you're sitting on the couch, you'll shake your arm just to make sure you get to 10,000, because it's going to make sure it picks up those peaks. But the question is that always accurate for older adults? And what we've learned is it might not actually be, because sometimes the algorithms that are used are only validated in younger adults. They don't consider how you change your movement as you age, because we all know, I don't know personally, but as you age, you start to change how you move slower, you hold onto handrails, and it doesn't consider some of the mobility needs that we need, such as like a handrail or using a walking aid, etc. So these analytics may not capture what you're actually doing in daily life. And so part of my research is looking at, well, does the method actually matter? So we have a very a very big study with multiple sensors, and we have the ability to measure this. If we use different methods at different wear locations, can we actually detect the same steps? And the reason we sit on step count is because step count is the most commonly reported measure of daily life mobility. It's easy to capture, it's interpretable, people can understand how many steps they take. But there's also other reasons. There's a big downstream effect. So when you talk about that long walking bout, if you're not detecting your steps accurately, then you may not be able to characterize that long walking bout that you guys do every morning, or something else that you guys participate in for activity. There's also no standard or guideline for measuring steps in real life, and that really makes people rely on convenience, and it dominates the literature. So this study that I'm going to present the data for had two objectives. The main objective was really, can we compare the effect of wear location and the algorithm that we use to analyze those squiggly lines for counting steps in daily life. And then the second objective was, well, if we look at a different score between two methods, who and what characteristics do they have that create large differences in that score? That might help guide or create guidelines for wearable sensors in the future. So what we sought out to do was compare those step counts between different wear locations, different algorithms, and we wanted to get the total steps, so the total steps per day. We wanted to get the differences between those two methods, and then we wanted to select the best match and analyze it further to understand what factors people have that cause step count differences. And this is some of the data that we've started to output. So you can see we had two different wear locations. We had the wrist and the thigh, just like in the setup in MacM3. And then in the wrist, you can see it's divided into two. There's open source, so it's an open source algorithm or equation that's designed for wrist data. And then we use the commercial output from that watch as well. And then at the thigh, we also had an open source analytic approach that was designed for the thigh. And then we had the commercial device from that thigh device as well. And you can see, and I echo what Marla said, you guys are busy people and you take lots of steps in the day, and that's really, really good. All the mean daily step counts in this group of people that I have that's inside the MacM3 data set are all above 7,000, even above 8. And the largest step count on average from our analytic approaches is from that commercial device worn at the thigh. And the smallest amount was the open source wrist-derived steps, worn at the wrist, so at 8,500 there. And you can see kind of the ranges that exist in there, where the ranges are in the background is kind of a standard deviation measure that measures the variability, but it shows you the spread of the data and how wide that range is for people that encompass the whole data set. So what we did from here is we made some comparisons between these two, and we took the difference score for each people. And I have 3 comparisons that I just want to share with you. So the first comparison on the left is comparing the wrist location, so comparing open source analytics derived for the wrist compared to the commercial output. And the mean difference that we found was 516 steps on average, with a really wide band of variability. We had a standard deviation of over 5,000 steps. So you can see that that data, just from the analytic methods, is very, very different. And again, at the thigh, we compared open source and commercial analytics, and we had a mean difference of 2,000 or 2,600, 2,600 about, with again, slightly smaller range, but still kind of a variability band that's quite wide, about over 2,000 steps per day. But when we compared the open source analytics, so the ones that are purposely derived and designed to detect walking, we had a better reliability, or a better difference, a smaller difference, which was negative 95 steps per day with a tighter band. So when we employed purposeful analytic methods that considered older adults, we had better agreement between the two methods. And a key takeaway from this is the method does matter. For older adults, we should rely on open source and purposely built algorithms for detecting walking, and that should be the standard that we move forward with. So now we wanted to understand, well, what factors of people that characterize individuals, what contributes to the difference, and can we highlight maybe little factors that are related to differences to better guide deployment of wearable sensors in the future? So we took all those questionnaires and surveys you did on the phone for all those many visits, and all those clinical visits that you did where we made you walk upstairs and walk around the track for 5 minutes or 400 meters. And then we looked at the relationship between the difference of that best score, so those open source analytics, the best ones we had. And there was 4 factors that were significantly related to the difference. When people walked faster or slower, we found that there was larger differences in their step counts from the different devices and the measurement that we did. If you reported using a mobility aid, we found that there was a bigger difference in the step counts from our thigh and wrist. If you participated in a large amount of physical activity, we tended to overestimate your steps from the wrist compared to the thigh. And if you reported a higher number of chronic conditions, so some of your health conditions, there was larger differences in the step counts as well. And really, our analytics don't want to stop there. We don't want to just improve our step count outcomes. We have been curating a very comprehensive open source pipeline to analyze these data. And really, this is an overview of it that simplifies it to try to demonstrate the scrutiny that we use to make sure our data is good. But we want to collect that data in its raw form so we can actually improve the analytics. We go through a process of cleaning and signal processing to clean the data, and as well to check all our quality outcomes. And then we're developing these analytics that are specific for older adults and specific for the needs, the unique needs that demonstrate in this population. And then we want to be able to deliver outcomes that are meaningful, that are related to walking and mobility, physical activity, intensity, and duration, and then also to demonstrate more mobility outcomes like life space and our trips in daily life. So I hope this gives you a little bit of an insight to the analytic methods and the care that we're trying to put into the data. We don't want to use just canned software because we think that the participation and time that you put in really deserves more, and it's going to improve our ability to detect early signs of decline. And we want to be able to take these outcomes and start relating them to the important adverse events or outcomes that are occurring, such as falls, which I'll pass off now to Dr. Steph Saunders, and she's going to talk about some of the falls data in MacM3.
Hello, everyone. Speaking of sitting for a while, we're getting closer to the end, but thank you so much for bearing with us. We're really excited to share our results, and I have some falls data to present to you. So This should look familiar to most of you in the room, but what you might not realize is why we asked you to do this. This was a huge burden. We really, really appreciate it. And we chose this method of collecting falls data because it's really the gold standard. And that means that experts have suggested this is the most accurate way that we can capture fall data across time. Now, it needs to include 3 things. The first is that it has that day by day, so you're checking it off each day as the time goes by. That's the diary piece. The second is that it's captured in real time as you go through the study. So of course, it would be easier to ask you just once at the end, but we wanted to have really rigorous, high quality data. So this real time as you go through those 2 years was really important. And last, that it had the definition of a fall clearly articulated on the postcard as an unexpected event in which a person comes to rest on the ground, floor, or lower level, just in case you weren't quite sure. So thank you again. Because of this really high quality data, we can again apply this to our study, and you're getting a really picture here of there was a lot of time and intention both on our part and your part, and we're so grateful. So to give you a brief snapshot, you sent in a total of 32,523 fall postcards. Thank you so much. That's very appreciated. 9 out of 10 of these monthly postcards were fall free, so you're on your feet most of the time. You reported 4,688 falls to date, and as Dr. Beauchamp mentioned, we're still collecting some of those final follow-ups, so likely expect a few more maybe in there perhaps. Among those people who did fall, half reported 2 or fewer falls. A bit of a tongue twister there. And then last, 47% of falls did result in an injury. And now this has quite a wide breadth, right? Some will go into what those were, but I think it's important to be, this is why we do this work, right? Because these falls are important and they are impactful, and we want to try to prevent them as much as possible. So if we look at some of the falls as stratified by different ages, the graph on the left here, you can see these 2 different groups. So we have individuals in the green who did not fall, and individuals in the red who did fall. And along that y-axis there, it's from youngest to older at the top. And so we can see that these 2 boxes generally are pretty aligned. There's not a big, huge difference between them. And so that suggests that for most part, our people who fell were not substantially older or younger than those who did not fall. If we zoom in a little bit more on this graph on the right, we have these different age bands now along the bottom, grouped by 5 years or so. And we have the percentage of individuals who fell along the left-hand side. And so you can see that as the age range does increase, there is a slight increase in the percentage of people who did fall. So this older age group, perhaps we might see more falls in that age group. Now, you'll notice as well, we don't have that many people 85 years of age or older. So this is, we're still working on understanding this completely, but it is important to remember that as we age, these are a risk of falling. Or a risk of falling does increase, rather. If we look at this by our fall outcomes by age and sex, we do see a little bit more of a difference. So here we have the ages along the bottom in the groups there, 65 to 74, 75 to 84, and 85 years plus. And again, on the left-hand side, we have that percentage who fell. And the individuals in the red are females, and the individuals in the blue are males. And we see that maybe for these younger ages, there isn't a huge difference between individuals who fell and did not. But as we get into this older age group, so this 85 plus group, we do see quite a big jump between 48% to 70% difference between males and females. So we might be thinking that older males may be at a higher risk for falls going forward. If we take a look at the reported injuries, so as I mentioned, 47% had an injury, so we had 53% that did not have an injury. The most common injury were bruises, with about 19%. General discomfort accounted for 9% of injuries. That's things like swelling or just achiness. Cuts and abrasions accounted for 8.5% of injuries. Sprains and strains around 5% of injuries. And then others and arm, wrist, or hand fracture were around that 5%. So 95% of injuries were generally classified as not serious. 8.6% of injuries did result in a doctor's visit within 48 hours. And 1% of injuries resulted in hospitalization. So we're still concerned that the impact of falls can be very impactful, and part of the reason why we're doing this work. A common question we get living in Canada is, what about seasons? How are falls distributed across different seasons? So here you can see along the bottom are the months of the year. And in the dark blue is the winter. Spring months are in green, summer months are in that yellow color, and then fall in that brownish color. And we can see these are the total number of falls reported within each month. And you do see a little bit of a trend. So as we look at the winter months, as they move into spring and summer, there is a slight relative increase in falls in those winter months as compared to those spring or summer months. But we might see how that progresses as we finish up the rest of the study. And the last thing I want to leave you with is, what about the falls mechanisms and causes? So this matrix here, we see causes of falls along that mechanisms of falls along that left-hand side, and they're ordered from the most common reason to the least common. And then along the bottom, we see the causes of falls. So things like flooring, environmental hazards, footwear, medical conditions, furniture, rug or carpets, yard tools, sports equipment, and carrying things. And so if we look at this first section that was the most common, standing or walking, we see that flooring and terrain were really one of the biggest causes of falls in that aspect. So things like wet floors or puddles, uneven floors, ramps, trips on rugs or clutter, and wearing things like slip-on shoes seem to be causing most of those falls while standing or walking. If we take a look at the next most common, which are those stairs or steps, a lot of it was missing a step. So that poor contrast from seeing, we're falling a little bit as we go down the stairs there. In terms of exercise and sports, pickleball did come up probably most common. Not to say that it's a bad idea, it's a great sport, but being mindful of our footwear when we're playing and things like that. We also see some falls from skiing or hockey, cycling. Walking a dog was quite common, so being mindful of the leash and not getting too tangled. And if we move into slippery conditions, yes, the ice and snow and the unplowed sidewalks came up, but also skating rinks. A few of us were walking on the skating rink, so just being a little bit mindful of our footing there too. And last, in terms of posture and movement, chores were among the most common, so bending, reaching to clean, things like that, and gardening, so a few stubborn roots, it sounds like. And so the takeaway from this slide really is just that most falls are happening while we're standing and moving and walking. And there are most of these are preventable. So things like uneven flooring, watching our footwear, and being mindful of clutter, moving clutter out of the way can be a way to prevent some of these falls. And if we take a look at what's next for the MacM3 falls research, like everyone has said, you've given us an absolutely robust and rich data set to work with. And so Ben and I are actually working together right now looking at how we can link falls to these everyday movements like walking, activity levels. And thanks to all of your work and the analytics that we've set up, we're in a good spot to keep moving forward. So thank you. And I would now like to Dr. Beauchamp's going to talk about the AIM study.
So those were just two examples from two of our postdocs in our labs, the kinds of research they're doing, and there's many more. So really, really appreciative of all the information you've provided, and we plan to make use of every last drop of it. I just wanted to very quickly talk about, because we have MacM3 and it's such a rich platform, we've been able to leverage it to do other studies to answer other questions. So this one, some of you might have heard of and decided to participate. It's called the Aging, Infection, and Mobility Project, or AIM project. And that's the one where we're asking you to let us know when you have symptoms of a respiratory infection or illness, and then you do the swabs and you send in the swabs so we can see exactly what kind of virus you had, and we track your symptoms over time. And so this project is actually funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, and we have 756 people that have elected to be part of that study, which is fantastic. We know we're asking a lot of you, but we think it's really important to be able to understand how common respiratory infections like COVID-19, like influenza, like RSV, how do these infections impact people over the longer term? And are there things that we need to be doing in the community to help support people after an infection? Because right now that's pretty much non-existent. So we had 756 people that have joined the study. So far, we've this is a bit of a plug. So we've had 13% of people report that they've had symptoms of an infection, but they didn't do the swab. So we really need you to send us in that swab so we can figure out what infection you ended up having. So 22% had an infection, had at least one infection that was confirmed after testing the swab. So 22% of people. And actually 8% ended up with 2 or more confirmed positive infections. And then around 5%, so it's a minority of people, 5% ended up with unresolved symptoms at 3 months. So this is sort of why it's really, really important that we continue to receive your data on this. We continue to track infections, especially when symptoms don't resolve, so we can try and better understand, what are the long-term impacts of these respiratory infections and what can we do better in terms of support. So the most common infections so far have been COVID-19, so 24%. I know we're really tired of hearing about COVID-19, but it is still circulating. So 24% of people of those infections were classified as COVID-19, 22% as rhinovirus, and influenza A at 10%. So this study really, truly is ongoing. So that's all the data I have for you today. But I just wanted you to understand how important it is and what it is we're trying to do with it. And next time we come back for our next event, we should have some more data to share. In speaking of new studies, I'm now going to introduce to you Dr. Louise LaFortune, who is she's a professor actually in the Department of Health Research Methods, Evaluation and Impact. It's a long department title, and she's leading the Aging Brain Research Program here at the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging. So she's helping us with the MindMove study, which is all about aging brain and mobility, and she's going to tell you about that because it's one of our new exciting things that we're launching.
Thank you, Marla. Very pleased to be here. It was lovely to hear all these exciting news about the data and how diligent you were in wearing all those wearables. You'll have to keep going. The MindMove study is also funded by Mira, and it's really building on MacM3. So there will be data collection, the same type of data collection that you have, wearable data. And the specific objective is to have a deep dive in understanding the relationship between mobility and the different ways that you've heard today and how it can be measured and how it can be predictive, and the brain, and how a healthy brain is crucial for good mobility and independence, but also how mobility can open a window on something that might be happening in the brain that can be picked up early. So all the information about how you move in daily life, how you make those decisions to move around, consciously or unconsciously, are the target outcomes, the kinds of things we want to measure in MindMove. So it's not going to be any surprise that there's a clear link between the brain and mobility, but something that we tend to not think about or forget is that the brain processes information, makes the decision, plan all those movements, often in the background without us thinking, but also our awareness of our body, the way we see. We saw in the falls that sometimes skipping a step, maybe not seeing very well, might cause some falls. All these signals are integrated in the brain, sent down the body to control some of your muscles or receive the signal, but also to allow your body to react, to avoid different obstacles and be able to react in an environment that can be surprising, different, or very comfortable where you don't expect anything. And your brain is the organ and the processor of all those signals. Why it's important is that as we age, a lot of people will have noticed that sometimes my thinking is not as fast or my mobility is not as fast. The relationship between brain and mobility is a two-way street. So there was a lot of studies, but there's still a lot of things we don't understand. That if you have a lower mobility, people who have a decline in mobility, are also showing signs that they might be thinking a little bit more slowly or that they are at higher risk of decline. And the other way around is true as well. And we need to understand what is the direction of travel. Is it mobility leading to decreased cognition? Is it the other way around? Or is it just a combination of different factors that come together to create that change in how we think and how we move? So the key question and the goals of MindMove is really to understand how the change in walking and balance are related to change in cognition and thinking in older adults, but also study whether mobility can give early cues about how you might benefit, or some people might benefit from extra support to keep a healthier brain, in the same way as you saw in some of the outcomes, how mobility can help you keep a healthier body. So MindMove will build from MacM3. It is a 36-month study. We do have ethics, and thanks to the hard work of the team that you'll meet in a few minutes, the study is almost ready to be launched. It will be eligible MacM3 participants who will be invited, starting with Hamilton. Not everybody will be eligible for the study, and you'll see that in a minute. There'll be in-person visits and online data collection. How it differs from MacM3 is three core things. So there will be a much deeper battery list of tests to study the brain. So the cognition, there'll be 4, you can see the black dots, baseline, 12, 24, 36 months, where we'll study cognition in depth. There will be 2 magnetic resonance imaging, so one at baseline, one at 36 months. And the frequency of visits, you might be happy to hear, will be different. So there will be wearables only once a year for the study, as opposed to every month. And every 4 months, you still have those postcards and some online measurement. But the data collection is stretched a little bit, because we're not looking at the detailed mobility, but we're focusing on all the time and the data analysis on exploding our understanding of the brain. There was one small test in MacM3 that already gave us some insights into your brain health, and this is the deeper dive. So just generally, some people might be wondering what kind of test this study involves. You can think of the brain as the hardware, and the MRI is going to take pictures, the actual picture of your physical brain. There are some regions in the brain that are responsible for your executive function, your thinking, your decision-making. These are very often similar to those places in the brain that will light up if we take a signal when you move around. So there's a co-location in the brain of the places that are involved in your thinking and the places that are involved in you making decisions and moving around. And the MRI will allow us to look into this. We also have the cognition, that is the software of the brain, and this is going to be tested on your thinking skills. So you can think of this as brain games. There's no right and wrong. But over time, by measuring, people can do better or worse depending on what's happening in their lives and how the test and which test we're talking about. So there are memory tests, problem-solving tests, and focus check. And if you look at some of these, you can see that it relates directly to those different things that your brain is doing when you need to move your body around. How your participation will help. It will really help over the 3 years of the study to really leverage all the data you already contributed, all the mobility data, all the health data, functional outcomes that you've collected. We will build on this. It will allow us to show changes in thinking and how that develops over time in relation to walking, to better understand how we can develop the interventions that Marla mentioned earlier. It will link the change in mobility to cognition and see if we can link that to what we see in the brain as well, to detect and have early signs of what might be risk or triggers for mobility decline when the brain is not functioning as well as it should. And also, and importantly in terms of practical application, is to find the early signs that might help us support both mobility and brain health so that people can remain independent. So that's the study, and hopefully some of you will be excited about it. Thanks.
So that is soon to launch, and Louise is here, and you can ask her any questions, or any of us really questions about that if you have. I want to do, okay, I'm trying to remember what the order of things. Okay, I want to quickly acknowledge that we have an entire team of people that make this happen, and they are really, really phenomenal. We're going to introduce them all after the Q&A, but a lot of them are here, and you can kind of identify us because we're wearing these name tags, okay? So please do come and find people, talk to them, because they've all been so critical to getting this. This is a very big study to run, and without our team, we wouldn't be able to do it. And also our partners and our funders. And we've already mentioned the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging and the LaBarge Center for Mobility and Aging, who really got all of this started. We've been able to bring in more funding over the years, but without that initial support, we never would have gotten off the ground. So right before we start our questions, we're going to have a question and answer session. I'm going to introduce another co-lead on the MindMove study, Dr. Parminder Reena, who's also the director of the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging. He just wants to add a few more words. If you know Parminder, you know he likes to talk. And so he wants to add just a few more words about MindMove so you can kind of appreciate the importance of it a little bit more.
Thank you, Marla. There will be no chance for questions and answer because I'm going to keep talking now. I just wanted to add, Louise did a wonderful job of introducing the MindMove. And question which always comes, why we are doing MindMove. One of the things to keep in mind that there are around 1,500 different drugs that have been developed and literally have failed to treat and manage dementia. So the question that has come up, is there something we can do upstream, understand how brain ages and how that relates to prospective development of dementia or dementia-related disorders? Can we do something earlier to change the course of that nasty disease? And I think this is a part of studies that are happening around the globe. Can we develop some strategies for prevention than relying on drugs that don't work once you have dementia or dementia-related disorders? So your participation is going to be really critical to us, for us to understand how brain ages as it relates to the aging process in general. Thank you.
so now we'll open it up for questions, and you can always come and find, if you're not comfortable talking in a big group, we totally get it. You can come and find any of us after when we're mingling and having drinks, refreshments, having refreshments. So, but I'll open up the floor for questions. We have 2 microphone runners. I'm trying to find them. Ashley back there, and I think Chukwi's right coming down the middle here, so they'll bring you a microphone. So we have one question right up here.
I'm pretty loud now.
Okay.
It's maybe asking too much, but I wondered if there was a mechanism to give us individual feedback after 3 years in the Mind Move study, how much we've changed in either mobility or cognition.
Yes, we will definitely, we haven't quite developed how the feedback will look, but it'll be very similar to what we've tried to do during MacM3. We've tried to give you as much data back as we possibly could in those individual reports that we give you. And so we'll be developing a similar reporting template for Mind Move as well. Yeah, great. Oh, one more, okay.
In listening to all of this, I do respect the information you are seeking, but not one word has been said about reading. I'd like to bet that there are some people here who cannot be mobile, but they're playing chess, they're playing all kinds of things, they're reading. I'm sure my data, when it was handed in, you probably thought I was in a coma because I read a lot. But I love the nagging that you do to remind us to stand up, move around when we're reading. But there hasn't been any mention of that more sedentary practice. And that keeps our minds going.
Absolutely, and I think this is an opportunity for us with the new study. We will be looking at those kinds of things more because a lot more things can affect brain health. We don't expect reading probably to have much of an impact on movement or mobility, but sure, absolutely, reading's a really important activity for brain health and for cognition, and so we will be collecting and using that kind of data more in this next phase of the study. Yeah.
I have a question for the in regards to the data analysis segment.
Yeah.
Given the amount of data you collect and the raw data, are you able to reverse engineer what the person was doing through the day? For example, walking horizontally, walking uphill, jumping, etc. That's one question. And by looking at the outliers, were you able to predict, oh, this person was this close to have a fall and it didn't happen? Yeah,
so, well, do you want to take it, Ben? Yeah, I mean, we have all of your, I'll just say, I'll start it and you might be able to finish it better. We have all of your raw data. So all of the information that you gave us from every sensor device, as Ben showed, we have that. We have loads and loads and loads of signal data on your movement, so we can go back and do that. And there are methods and tools that are being developed also not just here, but around the world that use, if you've heard of machine learning or artificial intelligence, that can be used to take that raw signal and to try and figure out what kind of patterns in that raw signal might be suggestive, for example, of someone climbing stairs, right? They've developed an algorithm for that based on data in the UK, for example. So we will be able to look, what we showed you today was an extremely high level look at some of the low-hanging fruit data, outputs that we can get out right now that we're pretty confident about, but we have all of that raw data. We can reverse engineer and go back and really look and try and figure out what someone's doing and use more advanced techniques to help us sort of decipher that. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Do you have anything to add? Okay.
How does one enroll on
Yes. We are going to contact everyone that is eligible will be contacted. So don't worry, we will come find you. And even people that are no longer active in the study, we will still come back and ask you to give us some time because we've got a lot of people to get through.
We are told that this study is expanded to other part of the world, like Europe, and so how does our data, your Canadian data, compare with other data? Do you get those?
Okay, so I think you're asking how does this data kind of contribute to data in other parts of the world?
How they compare?
How do they compare? Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, we are a developed country here, right? And so we don't actually have, to be fair, a lot of really good data, like wearable data from developing countries, but from other developed countries around the world, the data actually looks pretty similar. So far, for example, if you compare our data to data that has been gleaned from the UK Biobank data, which is a big data set in the UK, our numbers look similar, our number of steps look similar. We're also joining our study, MacM3. Do you remember we went back and we asked you, are you okay with us sharing your data internationally? So the MacM3 study became part of an international consortium called ProPass, which is called the Prospective Physical Activity, Sleep, and oh my gosh, Sedentary Behavior Consortium. And see, we have to keep our minds sharp. And so anyone that agreed to share their data, that data is going to be part of an international data set. So that's going to take data that we've collected, it's going to combine it with data from countries all over the world, so we can get really robust signals in predicting, mortality, predicting much more rare events that we wouldn't have the statistical power to do just in our study alone. So we are really trying to make sure that all of our data collected here is maximized, that all the information you provided is used in the best possible way that we can use it to inform, World Health Organization physical activity guidelines. And I can also say that I use the data, so some of the data that we presented today and some of Ben's work looking at different tools, ways to measure step count, I use that in a presentation I did for the World Health Organization because they're trying now to use wearables to monitor physical activity at the population health level. So you know how Stats Canada does all these surveys every year, and other countries around the world do the same. They want to start using wearables to get people's physical activity data. And so they're using our information and the lessons that we've learned to try and figure out how better to do that. So we're doing all of that.
One other question.
Yeah.
Like we find the mobility changes over a period of time, but are we able to distinguish it's because of osteoarthritis or an injury on the knee or a leg or that part is, we never asked that question.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part. I caught.
Mobility changes because of osteoarthritis.
Yes.
Or any injury to the joints.
Yeah.
So mobility will change because of osteoarthritis or any injury.
Or injury, yeah. Yeah.
So we have never asked this question. If somebody had a knee joint replacement or a hip replacement, if that contributed to improving the mobility or not, on that part is not being captured.
Okay, well we do, so I think we do ask that question about hip and knee replacements, and we do have data on osteoarthritis. If you remember, it was kind of the most common condition, one of the most common conditions that people had. And we are constantly asking you about your mobility changes. I suppose we aren't asking you why. We're trying to get that from the data. So if you've told us you've had a hip or knee replacement, or you have a new diagnosis of osteoarthritis, and we've also seen that your mobility has changed, then the data can tell us what the most likely cause of that is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then if the mobility has decreased and then you notice that it has improved later,
Yeah.
then would you be able to find out if it's because of joint replacement? Or
Yeah.
not?
Absolutely. We can look. So we're going to have the ability to look in subsets of people that have had hip and knee replacements and people that have osteoarthritis. We're going to be able to look at mobility trajectories and trajectories of change within those conditions and within those subgroups. We're going to be able to do all of that. So we will have that data. It's a good question. It's a good question.
Hi, just a question about the mind study. Recent times have shown a direct connection between gut and mind. Gut also determines your, should we say, energy level,
Yeah.
which then impacts your mobility. At any point, are you going to connect to that area of biology?
That's a fabulous question, and that is being studied, for example, within the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging. We don't currently have that included as part of MindMove. We are planning on seeking, we're using initial funding from the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging to launch the study, but then our team is planning on writing several grant applications to support expansion. And absolutely, the gut-brain mobility link is very important, and more data is showing up there every day. So it's something we might consider. I don't know if Parminder, you have something to add. He probably does. Yep. So because they are doing that in CLSA. Well, he comes. Oh, there he goes. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we had a regular discussion whether we wanted to do collect fecal samples and look at the gut-brain axis. But the problem in the context of MIRA is, the MacM3 is that we only have 1,500 people. To really look at different genomics and bugs in the gut that link to the brain, you need large sample sizes. That's why we are doing it in the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging, where we have 30,000 people, and we are doing brain imaging and collecting what we call microbiome, which is the environment in your gut. So that's why we decided not to do that in the MindMove study in the context of MacM3, because the sample size isn't there. I wanted to add to the question that was asked earlier on, how is this study unique or similar to other studies around the world? There are lots of other studies like this. If we are doing it even in the Canadian Longitudinal Study, and the same devices we are using in that, but we measure mobility 3 years apart. Whereas MacM3, I think, is the only study that we know of that collects data every 4 months. It is very unique. It gets into the minutiae of change that many studies can't do. So it's important to keep that in mind. That's what makes it really, really different from other studies anywhere in the world.
Yeah, great points.
I have a question regarding another study that's being done, and I was wondering if there's any correlation between this study and a study that's being done with young people. It's a mobility study, a motion and activity study, where they're wearing devices, and they're in early public school,
Oh.
and they are doing movement and being recorded except when they're in the
I do know there are a lot of wearable technologies have, since we began, they've become really hot. They're very, very hot all around the world, and they're being used a lot in lots of different studies. I'm not aware of the particular one you're describing. It is with McMaster. So maybe later, if you want to tell me who the investigator is, I might be able to figure it out. But there is, as long as they're collecting raw data like we are, and then there's lots of ways to potentially compare in the future.
It'd be interesting to see the ongoing
Yeah.
results of that. I won't live long enough to find out how it compared. Only now at the age of 10 and having done it for the past 2 summers, and then seeing
Right.
in the next 30 years.
Right.
I'm getting limited, but I thought, wow, I wish I could get a plan on the wall for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'd love to hear more about that, and I can definitely look into it. Anything else? I know there was a question over here, Chukwi, and there's a microphone there.
Yeah, I've had the mic for a little while. Just a question regarding the cognitive data that was gathered. What will be done with it, or what has been done with it, and why has that not been shared with us?
Well, it's a great question. We've just started really looking at the cognitive data. So as part of MacM3, we do have, do you remember it was called the MoCA test? Yes, so we do have that data, and we've started to look at it and look at relationships that we can see between MoCA and mobility, and some of that is sort of helping us guide how we design Mind Move. So that hasn't been shared, mostly because we're not done with it yet. If you can appreciate how much data, and even our focus has been so far really on the wearable data and trying to get all that processed and clean so we can kind of meet our main objectives. But we are absolutely going to get to it. All the data that you contributed counts. We are absolutely going to get to it. And maybe it's actually good to know, and that's something you can write about out on the wall. We wanted your feedback. What are you most excited about? What do you want to hear about? And if that's something you'd like us to focus on for the next one of these, please write it down, and we can try and do that. And also our webpage, on our lab, our group webpage, there's information about MacM3 and publications, and we've started doing these blogs every time we publish a paper. It's called Publication Spotlights, I think, or Publication Highlights. So you can see kind of in lay language what we found, what the paper was about. So check us out. See what's coming out in between these events too. Yes.
In terms of the cognition studies, are you looking at medication as well? And the reason I'm asking, cholesterol medications are a hot topic in regards to how they're impacting on the brain and physical activity. So I'm wondering if you're making notes about that.
Yes.
Because I don't think the drug companies care to, but I'm wondering if you are doing some of that.
And we are collecting detailed medication data. We have the medication data that you were on all the way through the MacM3 study, and then we're repeating that all again in Mind Move, so we'll be able to look at medication and as well, yes. I know there's been, over here, there's lots of questions. I keep seeing, Irene, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I have two. So over the winter, because I don't like the cold and I don't like going outside and taking the chance that I'm going to fall, I do a lot of standing up jigsaw puzzles. And I move around, and so how does that compare with sitting or walking?
Well, it's much better than sitting. And so by standing up and moving around and doing a jigsaw puzzle, or just doing your dishes at the sink, for example, all of those things count as light physical activity.
Yeah.
So, and as we saw, standing time, if you have too little standing time, that's not a good thing in terms of your risk of hospitalization and ER visits. So I think that sounds great what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Yeah. Okay, and when I'm standing and I do what do you call it, exercises like stretches and stuff, weight bearing without weights. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, now the new study, what are the wearables?
What are the wearables? Well, they're the same. So it is going to be the same smartwatch in the thigh-worn device. I know a lot of people find it bulky. We do know that. We are investigating another option. I'm not sure when it will be ready, but it will be the combination of the two variables, but it's only one time a year.
Okay, I ask that because there are those of us who have really small wrists.
I know.
And these watches, like, even on the tightest, can that not be done with Velcro or something? That is easier?
I mean, we can look at it. We can try and look into different bands. That's a really good idea, Irene. That's a great suggestion. Let's try and look into that. And we have heard from many of you. We know that smartwatch component is bulky, especially if you have smaller wrists. We do hear you, and we are doing our best to find another suitable device.
And it's still going to be the thigh thing too?
Yes, it will still be the thigh with that.
Yeah, and in the AIM study, was there a percentage of participants who had no symptoms and no infections?
Yes.
What
It was
percent
only,
was that?
Well, it was only 22% that had infection. So it would have been, thank you, 78% of people would have had no infections.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I know there are questions over here. In the front here, he's been waiting a while. Renata, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. You look still very young. You've got a long career ahead of you. And it seems to me that you're sort of starting out on this journey of mobility, first steps. And now there's the mind move and perhaps gut brain. I just wonder, as you go forward, what directions do you see as possible, future directions, biomarkers, food, nutrition, I don't know, various...
Good question. First of all, thank you for the compliment. So I do have a lot of years left, and I have to say I'm so excited there's so much to study. I'm so excited to work with all the wonderful data in MacM3. But what I'm most excited about is actually how do we use this information, feed it back to you so that you can take these strategies today and do things in your daily lives to change your trajectory of healthy aging. So to be honest, that's what I'm most excited about. I mean, my move will be great, and we are going to do that for the next 3 years. But alongside that, I want to start looking at ways that we can take this information, give it to you, and help you make the changes you need to change, to hopefully impact your trajectory of healthy aging. So that's where my excitement is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
There's one here and one at the back.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So 3 more questions.
I just want to know if the devices that we wear, are they going to be waterproof pretty soon? Because I do WaterFit daily for 45 minutes, but all that information has been moved to static. And I know every WaterFit class is full. Mm-hmm. Every WaterFit class is full, and all the people in the pool are swimming lengths. So that's all information that's being missed. There's also aquafit classes,
Yes, yes. So we do, absolutely. We do capture a little bit of that when you do, that's why that dreaded questionnaire, the physical activity for senior, the PACE questionnaire, I know it's very long, but that does allow us to capture via questionnaire format that information. And I know it's not good. It's not as good. I know you're not satisfied. I hear you. There are devices that are waterproof. We just need to find ones that will work within, if you can imagine how much it costs
Yeah,
for
I
us
understand.
for us to buy all those devices, and then they break and we replace them. And so we are trying. We actually have a small team of people that are working on testing new devices that are waterproof, that are smaller. We're definitely hearing this feedback and doing our best. I'm not sure that it will be ready for rollout very soon. But so in the meantime, please just keep telling us about all this great water activity that you're doing, and take those questionnaires seriously so we can account for that.
Okay, my second question is on the AIM study.
Yes.
I have had 3 different occasions where I've had to send in my
swab.
results, my swab, right? But they all come back as nothing.
Yeah.
And yet I'm sick.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. So the swabs test for it's a PCR test. It's a very accurate test for specific viral respiratory infections. So you probably absolutely had infections, but they may not have been a viral respiratory infection. So that's why. So it's still good, though. The symptom data is still really important for us to have. So we still want all that data, but we might not be able to characterize it as a particular strain of virus.
With regard to the infections, have you done a correlation between those who have been vaccinated for everything and those who've chosen not to?
That has not been done yet, but it is a planned analysis. So with the issue with some of those analyses is you can't do them too early. You have to wait until all the data has been collected so you have enough power to really answer that question. So we do have a question planned to look at vaccination status, and does that impact risk of infection, and does that impact recovery from infection? So that is a question as part of the AIM study. So stay tuned.
Hi. With your next study, you require 2 MRIs. Will they require radioactive dye?
No.
So they'll be done totally without?
Totally without.
And nothing needs to be swallowed, because I know one study was mentioning taking an internal pill.
No, this one, nothing needs to be swallowed.
Okay. I'm in.
Okay, any other burning questions? I know we've been sitting for a while. Okay, we're going to take these 2 more. Oh, okay, sorry.
Hello. I have a simple question. In the first lecture, he said, has talked about different number of steps people take. So my question is, what is the acceptable number of steps we can take each day when the weather is good?
Okay, great question. So the good news is that our data is very similar to other data in other parts of the world for different outcomes that suggests that for older people, forget that what you've heard about 10,000 steps, that doesn't mean anything. 7,000 steps a day, if you can take 7,000 steps a day, you have a lower risk of mobility disability, so of developing a great deal of difficulty walking or do stairs. You have a lower risk of hospitalization and ER visits, and other work has shown you also have a lower risk of death. So 7,000 steps a day is a really good, easy target that we know has really good validity for older people.
One of the shortcomings where we are here is the weather.
Yes.
We have 3 or 4 different kinds of weather.
Yes.
So people find it hard to go outside and walk as much as they can, as in the summer.
Yes, and that is, and that's why, you know what? There's a presentation that I did recently for the Optimal Aging Portal. We'll put it on our website, and it's all about walking, and it talks about walking in different seasons and things you can do. And I will say something about the data. You asked me for a number, and I gave you 7,000, but it 100% depends on where you're starting. Okay, so any movement, all the data has consistently shown if you go from doing very little to doing something, you are going to realize health benefits. So anything is better than nothing. Every movement counts is what the data shows us from all over the world. But if you want a particular target, the 7,000 steps is good, but you adjust that. On days where it's really, really hot, you maybe don't do 7,000 steps that day. That day you maybe walk inside a mall. You make sure you have, a proper hat. You use shade. You walk either early in the morning or later in the day. So there's lots of things you can do to adjust. The most important thing is not to get 7,000 steps every day, but to have that as kind of a target and to make sure you're just walking every day as much as you can.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So the good news is MRIs are the ones, they don't have any radiation, so they're very, very safe. So there's no limit. Yeah. Good. That's a good question, though. Okay, I'm seeing that we're getting antsy. I know there are a few more questions. We are all going to be here. What I'd like to do is if I could have our team members come up quickly. Team members, we're just going to show you who we are, and you can find any one of us and ask us a question afterwards, okay? And I'm going to remind you that we have the posters at the back that talk about specific research projects. So we have those posters. Come all in front. Come, come, come. Wow, there's a lot of them. These are all the people that make the study happen. So thank you. Yeah. Okay. So guys, where's the microphone? I just wanted everyone to just quickly just say your name and what you do for the study so that everybody knows who you are, and please come and find them and talk to them. They're a wealth of information.
Oh my God.
Go.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Fadger. I'm a master's student in this lab, and my research focuses on physical activity.
Hi, I'm Isabella. I'm a PhD student, and I'm involved in the AIM study.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reva. I'm a fifth-year undergrad student at McMaster, and I'm doing my internship over here. I help with data collection and also fall follow-ups.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I'm one of the research assistants. I work on the MacM3 team, and I will be working on the MindMove team as well.
And my name is Tara. I'm one of the main research coordinators for the study. If you got an email from the study, it was probably from me, but it's nice to see everyone in person.
My name is Ashley. I'm a physiotherapist, and I'm a postdoc here at MacM3.
Hello, I'm Cody, and I'm a software developer, and I work on actually getting the data processed and automated to pass along and get all these, get the data together.
Hi, I'm Fulvia. I'm a research staff, and I'm here to data collection, and I'm also at McMaster doing the protein study, which is a sub-study from this study.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Sean. I'm a postdoctoral fellow here. My research is focused on using all the device gathered data to understand how people's daily behaviors spent in physical activity, sleep, and sedentary time impact healthy aging outcomes.
Hello, my name is Brian. I'm one of the research assistants for the MacM3 study, but I mainly work at the Toronto Dixon Hall site with the Mandarin speaking participants.
Howdy, I'm Ethan. I make your reports, so if you have any questions about those, you can come talk to me, especially if it's where is it? That's a question for me.
That's very brave, Ethan.
I'm surprised you admitted that. Hi, everyone. I'm Sashi. I am the research coordinator for the MacM3 study at the Dixon Hall site in Toronto.
Hi, I'm Hinata, and I am a research coordinator here at the MacM3 study.
Hi everyone, my name is Veroniga and I'm actually an incoming fifth year student at McMaster. I'm an undergraduate student and I'm a co-op student here for the summer.
Hi, my name is Alexis and I'm a research assistant in the lab and I helped with data collection in your in-person assessments.
Hi everyone, my name is Isha. I'm a research assistant with the study. You probably recognize me from the physical assessments or probably my voice from the phone.
Hi, my name is Tianyu. I'm a software developer and I'm developing the wearable software.
He's the guy trying to give us a better device for the wrist. You want to talk to him?
Hello, my name's Kathleen. I've spoken to many of you on the phone. I'm the one who put you through the 45 minutes of PACEs and your cognitive tests. I'm a research assistant with MacM3 and the MindMove study coming up.
Hi everyone, I'm Qiu Kui Hao. I'm a research associate at the lab. I'm doing help with the data interpretation for the report. Okay, thank you. Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I just wanted you to meet everybody and also to see that your data is supporting all of their roles, their jobs, and their training opportunities as students. And this is just our group here. That doesn't even count all the co-investigators that are part of the study and all the students that are working with them. So your data is not only helping us answer critical questions, but it's also helping students and staff do their learning and meet their own goals. So thank you very much. So I think we can let you get up. So posters at the back. Outside is the whiteboard. Tell us what you're excited about. Come and find any of us and feel free to ask us your questions. And please make sure you get a delicious cookie on the way out. Thank you very much.